Croeso I Bangor. Welcome to Bangor, the oldest city in Wales. Boasting roughly 1500 years of proud history, Bangor is full of riveting stories, captivating landmarks and so much more. And on this walk around the city centre, on a spectacular summer's afternoon, we'll visit the majestic Bangor Cathedral, stroll past an array of historic city pubs, wander along the busy high street on market day, and then take in some gorgeous views across the city as we climb up towards the campus of the prestigious Bangor University. All of that is to come over the next half hour as we explore Wales's oldest city in depth. But here we begin our walk in the heart of Bangor's city centre, which is situated in a piece of low-lying land overlooked by the university's main building. The university is therefore the city's most prominent and most recognisable landmark. But beneath it there are plenty of points of interest to discover too. For instance, just here we find Bangor's historic War Memorial, which commemorates the Bangor men who lost their lives while serving in the First and Second World Wars. Now this monument is one of a number of memorials that you'll find on Bangor's streets, the city having established itself as a major urban centre in the last couple of centuries, and it's today the largest in the historic region of Gwynedd in northwest Wales. Taking a look at a map, we can see exactly where Bangor is located, between the historic towns of Conwy and Carnarvon in the very northwest of mainland Wales, and just separated from the island of Anglesey by the waters of the Menai Strait. Now this part of Wales is world famous for its array of majestic medieval castles, yet Bangor, despite being the country's oldest city, is not home to a centuries-old fortress. But it does possess an equally imposing landmark in the form of the gate that we see just across the road here. In all truth, it's no grand medieval gateway. This is actually another of the city's prominent war memorials. It's known as the North Wales Heroes Memorial, and it was opened back in 1923 to pay tribute more widely to all the people from North Wales who had died during the First World War. The memorial bears the names of 8,500 people from communities all across North Wales, and in fact as far south as the towns of Llanidloes and Montgomery in central Powys. In fact, on each side of the memorial, an inscription, one in Welsh and one in English, reads, "In memory of the heroic sons of Gwynedd and Powys, two historic Welsh kingdoms with a wealth of shared heritage." During the Middle Ages, when the two kingdoms were in existence, the city of Bangor, in Gwynedd, was a place of great significance in North Wales, as the seat of the powerful Bishop of Bangor, who was also Chief Bishop of all of Gwynedd. While the kings of Gwynedd may have resided elsewhere, Bangor emerged as the kingdom's leading religious centre, home to a monastery which later became Bangor Cathedral, which we'll be visiting shortly. Today though, Bangor is well known as one of North Wales' leading centres of education, and the prestigious Bangor University plays no small part in that. Here we're walking past the university's modern Pontio building, an arts and innovation centre that was opened back in 2015, and it plays host to the Student Union, a number of large theatres, a huge 200-seater cinema, and a cutting-edge science and innovation centre. Now the building's name, Pontio, literally means to bridge in the Welsh language, because while it was built by the university, Pontio's theatres and more are open to the general public, the building therefore seeking to bridge the gap between what's known as town and gown. Standing tall above us, we can see the mighty main building of Bangor University, the main campus of which is located on a hill overlooking the city. Because of this, university life and day-to-day city life are at times a little disconnected, and through the years this has created a division between the city's student population and its permanent residents, a division which is known as town and gown. This is a common phrase in university cities all over Britain. Oxford, Cambridge, St Andrews and more are all home to their own town and gown divisions. But in Bangor, this division has historically been rather pronounced. The university can trace its origins back to 1884, when it was founded as the University College of North Wales. And as we mentioned, much of the university campus, and the place where students live, are located in a rather separated enclave on one side of the city, an area known as Upper Bangor. This physical division was one of the main barriers between town and gown through time. But in recent years, the university has begun to forge closer ties with the rest of Bangor, and there are plenty of things which unite the two today. For instance, just here at the foot of the university campus, we find a fetching white building, which plays host to the Friends of Gwynedd Museum, a local museum which began life in the 1880s with a collection of artefacts that belonged to the recently established university. Today, the museum is housed in the same building as Bangor's Town Hall, which is actually much older than it seems on the surface. Though known popularly as the Town Hall, this building was historically known as the Bishop's Palace, and it was built nearly 500 years ago in the 1540s. As the name suggests, this was the place where the Bishop of Bangor resided. In fact, he did so all the way up until the year 1900, when the palace was acquired by the local council, who used it as their town hall. Now today the town hall, or Neuadd y Dref as it's known in Welsh, is daubed on the outside with a number of murals, showcasing the proud Welsh sentiment that you'll find all over the nation. But we mentioned at the start of our walk that Bangor is the oldest city in Wales, yet its council meets at a town hall, and with just over 18,000 people living here, Bangor is the third smallest city in the country. So the question is, how did Bangor come to be a city? Well, the first thing to know is that the two Welsh cities which are smaller than Bangor, St David's and St Asaph, have populations of just over 1,000 and 3,000 people respectively. So we know that it isn't size which matters when it comes to city status, a status which is traditionally awarded to places by the British monarch. Technically, Bangor was awarded this status too, in 1974. But the truth is that Bangor's city status long predates Wales's position in the United Kingdom. In fact, Bangor's city status even predates the existence of the unified nation of Wales itself. Just across the road here, we can see a historic building which until 2023 played host to Bangor Independent School, and before then was the home of the city's Canonry Museum and Art Gallery. Now, the old museum took its name from the fact that the building, originally built back in 1874, was where canons, religious clerics, lived, just a stone's throw away from Bangor Cathedral, the building which is responsible for giving Bangor its city status. For nearly 1,500 years, since the 6th century AD, Bangor has been a cathedral city, a status which afforded the people here special rights, which were drawn from the presence of a cathedral, the building which stands behind the trees just here. And this cathedral, which indeed boasts a good 1,500 years of history, is also the place where the city of Bangor began, established all the way back in the year 525 AD. Now, of course, none of the building which we can see today dates from all the way back in the 6th century. Most of the current cathedral, in fact, dates from between the 12th and 19th centuries. But people have been worshipping on this site for 1,500 years, ever since a monastery was founded here by Saint Deiniol. Deiniol, a Welshman, is traditionally referred to as the very first bishop of Bangor. He may have even been made a bishop by St David himself. But he began by establishing a monastery on a piece of low-lying land in the northwest of Wales here, which was granted to him by the King of Gwynedd. St Deiniol's monastery was one of the first of its kind in Britain, and it was established long before major centres of Christianity in places like Canterbury, Lindisfarne and Iona, elsewhere around the island. And so it turned Bangor here into a site of great religious significance, although at the time, the settlement didn't spread all that much further than the churchyard which exists today. We can surmise this from the city's name. The word Bangor actually comes from Old Welsh, and it literally refers to a wattled enclosure, That is, a small settlement surrounded by a fence made of twigs and branches. It was a humble start then for this historic city, but the cathedral which has stood at its heart has borne witness to plenty of significant events since it was established. It's suggested that the monastery was founded here in between the hills so that it was hidden from the danger of overseas raiders, who often targeted religious venues for their wealth and relative lack of defence. Unfortunately, despite its location, the monastery was still raided on a number of occasions, including in the 7th and 11th centuries, destroying any remains of the original medieval settlement. Still, the rebuilt cathedral also plays host to a number of significant tombs. Many figures of Welsh royalty are actually buried at Bangor Cathedral, including, but certainly not limited to, Ffordd Gwynedd, one of the most powerful Welsh princes of the medieval era. Just across the street from the cathedral, meanwhile, there stands a Castell, the castle, a relatively new pub which opened in the 1990s just beside the former Castle Hotel, a historic hotel on Bangor's High Street which was long claimed to be the oldest inn in the city. Now, Bangor is well known for its wide selection of pubs. There are at least 5 different pubs which stand along or just off the High Street here, which is the city's central shopping street. More than a mile in length, Bangor's High Street is actually the longest in all of Wales, and it stretches quite a distance across the city, all the way from the railway station to Beach Road on the city's waterfront. But there is good reason behind the High Street's length and the large number of pubs which have stood along it for so many years. We know that Bangor has been a cathedral city for more than a millennium, its history beginning with the monastery founded by St. Deiniol. But despite this status, Bangor was for a very long time a very small place, more akin to a large village. Just over 200 years ago, at the turn of the 19th century, the local population here had grown to just under 2,000 people. But it was shortly after that when Bangor transformed into the city that we know today, when wider circumstances put it on the map. In 1801, the United Kingdom was created by the union of Great Britain and Ireland, which at the time was under the rule of the British monarchy. In order to bring this now larger country closer together, the British government sought to improve communications with the Irish capital of Dublin, and so they set about building a new road between London and Dublin, which could allow people and post to travel easily between the two major cities. The road was commissioned in 1815, the very same year as the famous Battle of Waterloo, which lent its name to this historic pub in the heart of Bangor. Now, the Waterloo Inn is another of the city's oldest pubs, and it sprang into life in the early 19th century, when the road between London and Dublin was built through Bangor. Initially, Bangor was the road's endpoint, the last place on the British mainland before people and goods needed to be loaded onto boats destined for Ireland, and so it quickly became busy with people either passing through or staying the night in one of its many inns, known as coaching inns, which served passengers travelling across the country by stagecoach. After Bangor, people would board small ferries to cross over to the island of Anglesey, on the other side of the Menai Strait from here. But this was invariably a dangerous and inconvenient way to continue the trip. So in 1826, the famed engineer Thomas Telford, responsible for the road, built the mighty Menai Suspension Bridge across the water, which linked Anglesey with the Welsh mainland for the very first time. The main road, including the bridge, then stretched all the way to the port of Holyhead on the other side of Anglesey, which is directly across the sea from Dublin. But even so, Bangor profited greatly from the existence of the new road. The local population grew more than 3 times in size in the first half of the 19th century, and a wealth of new businesses were founded in the heart of the city, to serve people passing through, as well as the ever-growing number of people who had moved to live in Bangor. As a result, Bangor was no longer just a leading religious centre in North Wales, but also one of the region's most thriving commercial centres, as banks, jewellers and more were opened on the High Street and elsewhere around the city. In the more than 150 years since, Bangor's high street here has been through plenty of ups and downs. But on this sunny afternoon, we find the city centre full of life. Especially because today is Friday, Market Day, where stalls selling all sorts pop up around the city's historic clock tower. The clock tower was opened all the way back in 1887, and so after all that time, it's earned a bit of TLC, as we can see from the scaffolding here. But even with the repair work, it remains a prominent landmark in the middle of Bangor's mile-long high street, and a useful marker for finding the site of the city's market. Now, despite the city's age, Bangor's market is actually quite a new phenomenon, introduced in the 2010s to help revive the fortunes of the high street, but it takes place in the shadow of a wealth of historic addresses. The bank just here, for instance, was built all the way back in 1858, one of the many banks which were established in the city's early 19th century boom period, as traffic along the Holyhead Road continued to grow. In the modern day, Bangor is roughly twice the size of what it was in the mid-19th century, although more recent growth has been driven by local mining industries, the university, and more, whereas the old stagecoach route to Dublin no longer holds the importance that it once did. Still, with more than 18,000 people calling it home today, Bangor is the largest urban area in northwest Wales. And so the shops and market here don't only attract the people that live in this city, but also thousands who live in the nearby towns and villages of Gwynedd and Anglesey. Now, we know that much of the city we see today emerged in the 19th century, after Thomas Telford built his road through Bangor. But the truth is that the jump from tiny wattled enclosure to major urban area wasn't quite so sudden. About 100 years before Telford, a rudimentary mail route between London and Dublin passed through here in the early 18th century, giving birth to some of the oldest coaching inns which stood on Bangor's streets. In the late 18th century, local growth stepped up a gear as large-scale mining began at nearby Bethesda, which later became the home of the largest slate quarry in the entire world, the mighty Penrhyn Quarry. The presence of mining went hand in hand with the development spurred by Thomas Telford's road in the 19th century. It provided employment to an ever-growing number of people who were moving into the area, as did a number of smaller mills and mines surrounding the city, and shipbuilding facilities around the waterfront. Unfortunately, much of this industry met its end in the mid-20th century. The Penrhyn Quarry, for instance, was closed in 1962. But around Bangor's city centre, you can still find plenty of memories from this era. Just here we find ourselves on a road known as Tan-y-Fynwent, named for a historic burial ground, or Fynwent in Welsh, which was located here. But today the road is home to a distinctive building known as Penrhyn Hall, an old concert hall which was built all the way back in 1857, during the city's early heyday. Unusually for a local concert hall, though, Bangor's Penrhyn Hall was once known all over Britain, because during the Second World War, it was from here that many of the BBC's most popular radio programmes were broadcast. With the Blitz laying waste to London, the BBC moved its variety entertainment department out of the capital to Bristol in 1940. But Bristol too was falling victim to bombing raids, so the BBC then decided to move all of its variety entertainment operations to North Wales, making use of historic concert halls like the Grand Theatre in Llandudno and the Penrhyn Hall here in Bangor. During the war, a variety of popular radio broadcasts were made right here in Bangor, some of which would even attract audiences of more than 15 million listeners. Interestingly, while most operations returned to London after the war, the BBC did remain in Bangor, and it still does to this day. The main studios of BBC Cymru Wales, outside of Cardiff, are located right here in Bangor, in the quiet streets of Upper Bangor around the university campus. So, having explored the city centre, we're now going to begin making our way up towards the university in Upper Bangor, on the way passing by plenty more points of interest. The city's fetching old library here, for example, was built back in 1907, but most famously served as a volunteer centre during the Second World War. As we know, the BBC moved to Bangor because it was assumed that it wouldn't be a major target for German bombs during the war. But they weren't the only ones to think so. On the outbreak of war in 1939, more than 2,000 school children were evacuated to Bangor from the port city of Liverpool, and the old library was the first port of call before the children were taken to their new homes. Bangor was indeed much safer than Britain's largest cities, but still not entirely removed from the conflict. In fact, a parachute mine was dropped on Bangor on one occasion in 1941, killing 2 people and damaging 29 houses in the major Maesgerchen housing estate just on the edge of the city. So Bangor's history stretches all the way from the present day back to the early monastery founded by Deiniol, the Welsh saint who also lends his name to the road that we're walking along now, Deiniol Road, which stretches through the city centre and towards the railway station, on its way passing by a number of university buildings as well. As we've mentioned on a number of occasions, the bulk of Bangor University's campus, including classrooms and student residences, is located in Upper Bangor, but you will find a number of university buildings in and around the heart of the city too, where town and gown often meet. Pontio, just here, was of course built to bridge the gap between town and gown, the Modern Arts Centre providing a wealth of cutting-edge facilities which are available to be used by both students and the general public. But despite the historic division and physical separation between the core of the university campus and the city centre, we can wander very easily between the two, because Pontio here provides us with a handy and fairly direct staircase up towards the university's majestic main building, which overlooks the rest of Bangor from up on high. Along with a rather steep path through the adjacent park, this is one of the quickest ways to move between Bangor city centre and Bangor University, although as we can see by looking up towards the main building, it is a fair climb up to the top, which stands just under 100 feet, or 30 metres, above the city centre. But of course, the university was only founded in the late 19th century, and it didn't even start out in Upper Bangor. We know that Bangor University was originally named the University of North Wales, and as that name suggests, it wasn't specifically destined to exist in this city. At the time, plenty of other places around North Wales were also vying to become the home of the new university. Towns including Conwy, Carnarvon, Wrexham and Rhyl. But in the end, Bangor was chosen, supported by funds that were raised by local workers, as miners, quarrymen, shipbuilders and more contributed a part of their salary to help found a university here. Now initially, the university in Bangor was small. In fact, there were just 58 students in the first year, and they attended classes on the other side of the city, in one of Bangor's old coaching inns, a tavern known as the Penrhyn Arms. The Penrhyn Arms was located at the very end of the high street, by the waterfront, and it was built back in 1799 to serve the growing number of people travelling along the Holyhead Road. But by the 1880s, its owners decided to lease it out to the new University of North Wales. And the university made good use of the building. The old kitchen was turned into a makeshift library, and the former horse stables were made into a smoking room. But inevitably, as more students began attending, one former hotel was never going to be enough for the university. So in the first decade of the 20th century, a plan was made for the university to move to a new home on the other side of this city, in an area of land which we now know as Upper Bangor. The land, a 10-acre site, was donated by the city of Bangor to the university in 1903. And 4 years later, in 1907, work began on the grand main building, which we see looming above us here. Designed on an immense scale, and in a style which certainly wouldn't look out of place in cities like Oxford and Cambridge, the main building here was a clear statement of intent on the part of the university. It took 4 years to build, and after it opened in 1911, it quickly became an iconic landmark of the city of Bangor. It's often known to locals as y Coleg ar y Bryn, the college on the hill. As with any great university building, inside you'll find a labyrinth of classrooms, offices, lecture theatres, great halls, and beautifully landscaped quadrangles, in and around which the more than 10,000 current students of Bangor University mingle as they go about their studies. It's fair to say then that the university has grown since its early days at the Penrhyn Arms. Although, rather interestingly, the move to the main building from the old hotel wasn't immediate. In fact, after 1911, the university's science department remained on the other side of the city, at the old tavern for another 15 years, finally moving out in 1926 to a purpose-built venue. Sadly, the former inn where the university began was demolished when the new A5 road was built through Bangor, so you can't see the institution's earliest origins for yourself anymore. But if you venture into Upper Bangor here, then the tranquil streets of the university campus should more than make up for it. The university isn't the only thing on top of the hill here though. We already know that some of the BBC's offices are up here too. But there are also some amazing pieces of open parkland, which are a real hidden gem of this city. A short walk from the university's main building, you'll find a prominent hill, known locally as Roman Camp. Despite the name, the site likely wasn't ever home to a Roman camp, though it was home to a small Norman-era fort, which was built back in the 12th century, and its earthwork foundations still remain visible today. Of course, you will still find plenty of Roman references around the university campus, but the Norman fort was built on its site because of the way that Upper Bangor sits overlooking not just the city, but the mouth of the Menai Strait, the waterway which separates mainland Wales from Anglesey. And if you visit Roman Camp today, you can also enjoy some of the most spectacular views over the Menai Strait and the coast of Anglesey. While if you look inland, you can also take in stunning vistas of the mountains of Snowdonia and the surrounding countryside too. Roman Camp really is one of the most beautiful urban viewpoints in Wales, and it's well worth hiking up to if you're in Bangor. But sadly we won't quite have time to walk all the way up there, because here we're approaching the end of our tour at Bangor University's historic main building. The main building stands just off College Road, which winds its way through the main university campus, and as we can see, the building has been expanded in more recent years too, with a couple of 1960s era wings added to the building and creating a majestic central courtyard. The central tower stands proudly over one corner of the courtyard, while just to our left we can see an equally elegant building that plays host to the university's main library, quite the upgrade from the kitchen at the old Penrhyn Arms Hotel. There are plenty more interesting things to find in and around the university's main buildings as well. For instance, here in the courtyard there stands a small pedestal. It's topped by a sundial, and fittingly, the pedestal is engraved with a Welsh language inscription that reads, Hed amser meddi na, eris amser din a. You'll often hear it said that time flies, but this inscription suggests the very opposite, translating into English as time flies, say not so, time remains, 'tis man that must go. It's the kind of learned thing that you'd expect to find in the heart of a proud university like this one. But sadly, it's here at the university's main building that we've come to the end of our walk around the historic city of Bangor. Diolch yn fawr, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're now looking forward to visiting Bangor for yourself sometime soon.